Something insane is happening right now. A wealthy real estate mogul, living the high life abroad with his mistress, never expected the world he left behind to change. But when he returns home, he finds his ex-wife transformed, stronger, more independent, and thriving in ways he couldn't imagine. What will happen when their worlds collide once again? The Carter estate was a sprawling mansion of modern luxury nestled in the hills of Beverly Hills. Floor-to-ceiling windows, polished stone floors, and a grand chandelier that caught every glimmer of California sunlight. It was the kind of place built on money, power, and prestige, the dream home of the ultra-elite. But inside, it felt like a museum, beautiful, expensive, and empty. The hum of silence drifted through the halls, interrupted only by the distant tick of a vintage grandfather clock. It was a silence Isabelle Carter had grown accustomed to, though she still hadn't learned to like it. She stood before the full-length mirror in the master suite, smoothing the sleek fabric of her ivory silk dress. Her reflection looked refined, elegant, every bit the image of the poised, affluent woman she was expected to be. But the dullness in her eyes betrayed her. Even the diamonds around her neck couldn't hide the quiet ache. She adjusted the clasp at the back of her necklace, her fingers trembling just slightly, then stepped back to take one final glance. She looked the part of a real estate mogul's wife, polished, unshakable, enviable, but she didn't feel like any of those things. Downstairs, the deep thud of the front door closing echoed against the stone floors, followed by the sharp, purposeful footsteps of Nathan Carter. Isabelle drew in a breath, steadying herself. Every conversation with him lately felt like walking on glass. Careful. Fragile. Today, she had hoped might be different. She made her way down the sweeping staircase, her heels whispering softly against the floor. When she reached the landing, she saw Nathan near the entrance, his phone to his ear, his voice commanding. A man born to control every room he walked into. His dark hair was immaculately styled, his tailored suit molded to him perfectly. He looked like success, and he knew it. "Push the meeting to noon," he said coolly into the phone. "If they've got a problem with it, they'll get over it." He ended the call with a flick of his thumb, then turned. His eyes met Isabelle's. Something flickered there, a split second of recognition, and vanished. "Busy morning?" she asked, her voice light, careful. "Always," he replied, slipping his phone into his pocket. "Back to back all day." She nodded, her hands grazing the edge of her dress. "I thought maybe we could have breakfast. It's been a while." Nathan checked his watch, gold, gleaming, precise. "I can't. I've got to meet Sienna to go over our travel plans." The name landed like a punch, though Isabelle's expression didn't flinch. Sienna Rhodes. The woman who'd slid into Nathan's life under the guise of professional collaboration. She was young, magnetic, always dressed in something eye-catching, and far too familiar with Isabelle's husband. The world might have thought she was just another broker. Isabelle knew better. "You're still taking that trip?" she asked, her voice even. Nathan adjusted the cuff of his shirt. "Yeah. A few weeks in Europe, then Maldives. It's for networking." Isabelle bit the inside of her cheek, swallowing her response. Once a long time ago, she'd asked him to choose her over his deals. He hadn't, and eventually she'd stopped asking. "Sounds wonderful," she said, forcing a smile. "Hope it's everything you want." He paused, as if sensing something beneath her words, then moved past it. "It'll be good for us. Space." That word hung in the air like a final verdict. Isabelle dropped her gaze, burying the ache behind her composure. He didn't even realize they were already galaxies apart. "Well," she said, lifting her chin, "I'll be here. I've got plenty to keep me busy." "I'm sure you do," Nathan said with a nod, already turning toward the door. When the door shut behind him, the silence returned, heavier now, wrapping itself around her like a thick fog. She stood there for a beat, staring at the space he'd just vacated, then finally let out a breath. That night, she sat alone in her home office, a space cluttered with journals, sketchbooks, and unfinished ideas. The desk lamp cast a warm glow, but it brought little comfort. Her fingers traced the edge of an old photo on the desk. She and Nathan, years ago, younger, brighter, hopeful. She barely recognized herself in the smile. A soft knock startled her. She quickly set the photo aside. Maya, their longtime housekeeper, entered carrying a tray of tea. "I figured you could use something warm," she said gently, setting it down. "Thank you," Isabelle said softly. She waited for Maya to leave, then poured herself a cup, letting the heat settle in her palms. Her mind drifted again, back to that evening weeks ago when she'd overheard Nathan and Sienna laughing behind closed doors. That was the moment she knew, really knew. He wasn't coming back. He had already gone. But something inside her shifted tonight. She wasn't going to let this be her ending. Nathan could have his designer vacations, his lavish yachts, his mistress. She wouldn't be the woman left behind anymore. She had other plans. She reached for her notebook and flipped to a blank page. The pen felt heavy at first, but the moment she started writing, the weight lifted. Ideas poured out. Charity initiatives, creative ventures, dreams she had shelved for too long. This wasn't revenge. It was revival. A return to herself, the woman she was before she became Mrs. Carter. Hours passed. When she finally dropped the pen, the sky had begun to lighten. Her body ached from sitting, but her soul felt steady. For the first time in years, she felt powerful. The next morning, as Nathan zipped up his designer luggage, Isabelle leaned against the doorway and watched. He didn't see her. He was too busy deciding which tie to wear. She wondered if he ever really saw her, or if she had already become invisible. "I hope you have a beautiful trip," she said quietly. He looked over, gave her a courteous smile, and nothing more. "Thanks. I'll check in." He wheeled his bag down the hallway. She stayed where she was, listening until the front door shut behind him. Then she turned away, back toward her office. Her future. There was work to do, and she wasn't going to waste another moment waiting for someone who'd forgotten she existed. As Isabelle and Nathan stood on the edge of a new beginning, "We want to hear from you. What would you do if you were in their shoes? Do you believe in second chances, or is walking away the only real choice?" Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real powerful stories. The private jet hummed softly as it sliced through the sky, its leather seats and sparkling glassware a quiet testament to opulence. Nathan Carter reclined in his seat, one hand wrapped around a crystal glass of scotch, the other scrolling through emails on his tablet. The view outside, endless sky, puffs of clouds, was breathtaking. But Nathan didn't see it. His mind was elsewhere. Elsewhere, distracted by the weight of things he refused to confront, Nathan Carter sat in silence. Across from him, Sienna Rhodes sat with perfect posture, her crimson dress hugging her curves and her manicured nails tapping gently on the leather armrest. She was the picture of luxury, effortlessly beautiful and supremely confident. She glanced over at Nathan and smirked. "You're already working?" she teased, tilting her head. "I thought this trip was supposed to be about relaxing." He offered a half smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Can't relax just yet. A couple deals still need finishing touches." Sienna leaned in, resting an elbow on her seat's arm. Her perfume, an intoxicating blend of jasmine and amber, floated between them. "You need to learn to let go, darling. What's the point of having all this money if you don't enjoy it?" The plane jolted as it hit a small wave of turbulence, and Nathan instinctively gripped his glass a little tighter. "I enjoy just fine," he replied, too quickly. Sienna laughed softly, turning her gaze toward the window. "Then let's make sure this trip is unforgettable," she murmured, her voice coated in suggestion. The jet touched down in Monaco, where a fleet of black luxury cars waited to take them to the Hotel de Paris, a jewel of indulgence tucked in the heart of the city. Hotel staff welcomed them with professional smiles and well-practiced warmth, escorting them swiftly to their suite. The suite itself was art. Marble floors, chandeliers that shimmered like diamonds, and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the Mediterranean. It was the very definition of opulence. Sienna twirled in the center of the room, her laugh bouncing off the walls like champagne bubbles. "This," she declared, collapsing onto a plush cream-colored couch, "is what paradise looks like." Nathan stood by the window, watching waves kiss the shoreline in slow rhythm. The view was spectacular. But it didn't move him. He had built his entire empire for moments like this. But standing there, soaking in everything he thought he wanted, something still felt hollow. "Nathan," Sienna called, pulling him back. "Stop brooding and come enjoy this." She patted the spot beside her. After a beat, he joined her. She poured 2 glasses of champagne and held hers up. "To new adventures," she said, raising an eyebrow. "To new adventures," he echoed, but the words felt heavy on his tongue. What followed were days drenched in extravagance. Mornings on private yachts, champagne-fueled afternoons in designer boutiques, and glamorous evenings spent mingling at exclusive soirees. Nathan played his part. Smiles, handshakes, laughter, a flawless illusion. But inside, he felt like a man locked in a golden cage. One evening, they sat at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city's glittering skyline. Candlelight flickered between them. Sienna leaned forward, her eyes sparkling under the stars. "I've been thinking," she said softly, but with purpose. "Maybe we should make this arrangement more permanent." Nathan slowly lowered his fork. The ambient noise around them seemed to fade. "Permanent?" he asked, though he knew where this was going. She reached across the table and took his hand. Her fingers were cool and steady. "You've given me everything I ever dreamed of, but there's one thing I still don't have." Her eyes locked onto his, and he saw the ambition now sharp beneath the charm. "I don't want to just be your travel companion, Nathan. I want to be your partner." Her words weighed down on him like iron. He suddenly felt like the air had been pulled from the rooftop. He had seen this coming. But hearing it out loud, it was a reality he wasn't prepared to face. His mind wandered to Isabelle, the woman he'd once built a life with, the one he hadn't called since boarding the jet. The guilt crawled up his spine like fire. "I need time to think," he finally said, gently pulling his hand away. Sienna's smile faltered, just for a second. Then she masked it with a sip of champagne. "Of course, I understand." But the air between them shifted. No longer sweet, no longer light. Later that night, Nathan stood alone on the balcony, staring at the moonlit sea. The waves rolled in and out with such calm, mocking the storm inside his chest. Meanwhile, back in Beverly Hills, Isabelle was anything but idle. She had spent the last several days finalizing a project close to her heart, a scholarship initiative aimed at underprivileged youth. Her desk was covered in proposal drafts, donor contacts, and handwritten notes. But the flurry of activity gave her peace. She hadn't heard a word from Nathan. But she hadn't expected to. He was too busy basking in champagne and silk with Sienna, and for once that didn't break her. Instead, she buried herself in purpose, in something real, something lasting, something that mattered more than empty vows and luxury real estate. Late one night, as she skimmed through a financial report, her phone lit up. It was a message from her mentor, Eleanor Grant. "You're doing incredible work, Isabelle. Don't stop." Isabelle smiled, just a little. Eleanor had always seen something in her, long before Isabelle ever had the courage to believe it herself. Her quiet strength had helped Isabelle find her way back to the woman she'd once been, and the one she was becoming. Back in Monaco, the cracks were widening. Nathan had hoped this trip would reignite his spark, but it only amplified his sense of disconnection. One morning by the pool, Sienna scrolled through her phone, annoyed. "You're not even here," she said flatly, not looking up. "It's like your mind is somewhere else." Nathan rubbed the back of his neck. "Maybe it is." She froze for a beat, eyes narrowing. "It's her, isn't it? You're thinking about Isabelle." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Sienna stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the stone. "You're a damn fool," she snapped. "You have everything right in front of you, and you're chasing a ghost." She stormed off, leaving him there. He leaned back, eyes closed against the sun. But he felt no warmth. As the end of the trip loomed, Nathan couldn't ignore the gnawing truth. No yacht, no champagne, no high-rise penthouse could drown the emptiness inside. He had chased status, power, pleasure. But now he saw it. None of it had ever filled the void. And maybe Isabelle had been right all along. Maybe what mattered most had nothing to do with what he could buy or win or flaunt. Maybe what mattered was what he left behind. The mid-afternoon light streamed through the glass walls of Isabelle Carter's office, spilling across the floor in golden streaks. The faint smell of coffee lingered from the untouched cup beside her. Her fingers hovered over her laptop keys as she reviewed the latest proposal. The next phase of the scholarship initiative. This project, this mission, had become more than just a distraction from her crumbling marriage. It was a symbol of her rebirth. A gentle knock on the office door pulled her from her thoughts. Maya, the Carter estate's housekeeper, peeked her head in with a knowing smile. "There's someone here to see you, Mrs. Carter." Isabelle looked up, surprised. I wasn't expecting anyone. It's Eleanor Grant, Maya said, stepping aside to let the older woman in. Eleanor entered with her usual grace, a woman in her 60s who carried herself with the calm authority of someone who had weathered life and won. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, her silver hair pinned back in a perfect chignon, she moved with quiet confidence. She had been a steady, guiding presence in Isabelle's life since their chance encounter at a charity gala years ago. I didn't expect to see you until next week's board meeting, Isabelle said, standing to embrace her warmly. I had a free moment and figured I'd check in, Eleanor replied, settling into a chair across from her. Besides, I know how deep you bury yourself when you're chasing something big. Isabelle smiled, though her eyes gave away her fatigue. It's been intense, but in a good way. Eleanor tilted her head slightly, watching her. It was the kind of look that saw through everything. And how are you, really? The question landed with weight, quiet but unmissable. Isabelle ran a fingertip around the edge of her coffee cup. I'm managing. Some days better than others. Managing is not the same as thriving, dear. I know, Isabelle said with a soft sigh, but I'm getting there. This project, it gives me something to fight for. Something that's mine. Eleanor nodded. That's exactly why I came. I've spoken to a few of our major donors. They're ready to expand the program, and if you're willing, you could lead the next phase. The offer settled between them like a warm but powerful wind. Expansion would mean stepping out of the quiet corners she'd grown used to. It would mean stepping into the light, into her own name, not just Nathan's shadow. The thought was terrifying and thrilling. I'd love to, Isabelle said quietly, her voice growing steadier with each word. I'm ready. The next hour was a blur of strategy and planning. Eleanor laid out her vision. Isabelle countered with bold ideas and practical suggestions. Partnerships, funding, the board. The momentum felt unstoppable. By the time Eleanor left, Isabelle felt real. Not just seen, but recognized. She had spent years building someone else's empire. Now she was building her own. As the sun dipped below the hills, casting a golden haze across the skyline of Beverly Hills, Isabelle stepped out onto the stone terrace. The breeze brushed her skin gently as she wrapped her arms around herself. Not because of the chill, but because of the memory. She could still picture herself out here with Nathan, laughing, dreaming, holding hands and planning futures they never got to live. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at the screen. This is only the beginning. Don't let anyone hold you back. Eleanor. A small smile crept across her lips as she locked the phone and looked out toward the horizon. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't scare her. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Nathan Carter sat at the bar of a luxury hotel in Rome, nursing his second bourbon. The space around him buzzed with life. Chatter, laughter, the occasional clink of crystal. But none of it reached him. Sienna Rhodes sat beside him, flipping through her phone, visibly bored. You're quiet tonight, she said, still not looking up. I'm thinking, he muttered, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. She set her phone down with a sigh. You've been doing a lot of that lately. What's going on in that head of yours? He paused. Nothing specific. Sienna raised an eyebrow, her lips curling with mild amusement. Is it her? He didn't have to ask who she meant, and answering felt like admitting something he wasn't ready to say. I'm just reflecting. Please, Sienna scoffed, leaning in. You really think she's sitting around thinking about you? Isabelle's probably moved on. She's not waiting. Her words cut deeper than she intended. He had left assuming she'd always be there, a quiet constant in his chaotic world. But as the days passed, that certainty began to dissolve. I know, he said quietly. Sienna chuckled, but it lacked warmth. You're unbelievable. You have everything right here. Luxury, freedom, me, and you're still obsessed with her? Nathan downed the rest of his bourbon, the glass hitting the bar a little too hard. It's not that simple. Sienna rolled her eyes, grabbing her purse. Whatever. I'm going back to the suite. She disappeared into the crowd, leaving Nathan sitting in the noise that suddenly felt louder than ever. The money, the women, the deals. All of it had been noise, distraction dressed up as success. And now that the silence had crept back in, he realized how hollow it had all become. Later that night, he lay in the massive hotel bed, eyes fixed on the ornate ceiling above him. Sleep never came. He kept seeing Isabelle's face, The way her eyes lit up when she talked about the scholarship program. The way she used to look at him like he could do anything, even when he couldn't see it in himself. He wondered where she was now, what she was doing, whether she ever thought of him. Little did he know, Isabelle was awake too. Sitting at her desk in her robe, surrounded by paperwork and plans, her fingers danced across the keyboard with a sense of urgency and purpose. This was her time. She paused, eyes falling to a photo on the desk, her and Nathan on their first anniversary. Younger, simpler, hopeful. She turned the frame face down, then kept typing. She wasn't just rebuilding her life, she was transforming it. Across the sea, dawn crept over Rome. Nathan sat on the balcony, watching the city stir below. He sipped his coffee slowly, the bitterness grounding, unforgiving. Fresh bread, blooming flowers. A beautiful morning wasted on a man who couldn't feel it. His phone lit up beside him. Messages, missed calls, more deals, more noise. Sienna finally emerged, wrapped in a silk robe, irritation etched into her face. "You're up early. Couldn't sleep." She lit a cigarette, flopped into a chair across from him. "You're in a mood." He didn't respond. The silence stretched, and suddenly it hit him. The spark he once felt around her was gone. She wasn't what he needed, and maybe she never had been. As the sun rose higher over the city, Nathan Carter made a decision. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing. He couldn't keep running. Not from Isabelle. Not from the man he used to be. It was time to go home. The tires of the sleek black sedan crunched against the long driveway of the Carter estate. Nathan sat in the back seat, his fingers drumming anxiously against the leather armrest, staring out the window. The place looked just as he'd left it, palatial, flawless. But as the car rolled to a stop, something felt different. He couldn't explain it, he just knew. The driver opened the door, and Nathan stepped out, adjusting his jacket as the California breeze kissed his face. He paused, inhaling deeply, trying to steady himself. It didn't help. The front door opened before he reached it. Maya stood in the foyer, her expression warm but guarded. "Welcome home, Mr. Carter," she said softly. "Thanks, Maya," he replied, peering into the quiet house behind her. It was too quiet, save for the faint sound of piano music drifting from somewhere deeper inside. "Where's Isabelle?" "She's in the sunroom," Maya answered, stepping back. "I'll let her know you've arrived." He nodded, and stepped inside the house he once called home. But already, it didn't feel like his anymore. Something felt off. The artwork still hung in its usual places, and the grand staircase still curved upward with regal elegance. But the energy in the house had shifted. It was subtle, like the difference between silence and serenity, but unmistakable. Nathan Carter set down his suitcase near the base of the stairs and followed the faint notes of piano music echoing through the hall. As he walked, he noticed things that hadn't been there before. Fresh flower arrangements in glass vases, a new sculpture nestled in the corner alcove, books repositioned and sorted by color. Tiny changes, but they added up. Someone had been curating the space with care, someone who wasn't him. When he reached the sunroom, he paused in the doorway. Isabelle sat at the grand piano, her fingers moving with gentle precision over the keys. A soft, wistful tune filled the room. She wore a simple, elegant navy dress. Her hair fell in relaxed waves around her face. She looked peaceful. Peaceful in a way that made something in his chest ache. She must have sensed him there. Her hands slowed, and she turned to face him. For a beat, neither of them spoke. Her gaze was calm, unshaken. Unlike the last time he'd stood in front of her, she didn't look uncertain or small. "You're back," she said, her voice even. "I am," he replied, stepping in. "Didn't want to catch you off guard." She gave him a faint smile, polite but distant. "It's fine. I've had plenty of time to get used to surprises." The weight of that line hit him. He didn't respond, just glanced around the room. More changes. New books, fresh-cut lilies in a tall glass vase, a handmade throw draped across the armchair. Everything had her fingerprint. "You've been busy," he said quietly, gesturing around. "I have," she replied, folding her hands in her lap. "I needed a change." He nodded, absorbing the truth. "It suits you." An awkward silence followed. Then she rose and walked toward the window, looking out over the garden. "How was your trip?" "Long," he said, joining her. "Not what I expected." Things rarely are. She wasn't really asking, and he wasn't really answering. "Did you find what you were looking for?" He hesitated. "No." Her head turned slightly, surprised by his honesty. Then why did you go? He had asked himself that more times than he could count. I thought I needed distance, time to think, but the further I got, the more lost I felt. Her expression softened, but she stayed guarded. And now? I'm back because I realized what I needed wasn't out there. It was here, with you. For a moment she looked shaken, but only briefly. Nathan, you can't expect to come back and have things go back to the way they were. I don't, he said sincerely. I don't expect anything. I just want you to know I see things differently now. She studied him, measuring every word. You left me when I needed you the most. I know, he whispered, his guilt sharp and heavy. And if you let me, I'll spend the rest of my life making it right. A tear formed in her eye, but she blinked it away. I'm not the same woman you walked away from. I know, he said, and I'm not the same man. The wind rustled the trees beyond the window. The silence returned. Isabelle walked back toward the piano and ran her fingers along the lid. I've built a life while you were gone, one that works, one that doesn't rely on you. The words stung, but he didn't flinch. Then let me earn a place in that life. She exhaled, her shoulders relaxing slightly. I don't know if that's possible. It is, he said softly. I'm not asking you to believe it today or tomorrow. I'm just asking for a chance to prove it. She sat down at the bench again, hands resting on the keys. It's not just about you proving something, Nathan. It's about whether I want to let you in. He swallowed hard. Tell me what you need. She looked up at him. For the first time there was something open in her eyes. I need time. I can give you that. The hallway clock chimed softly. She stood, walked toward the door and paused. Don't make promises you can't keep, Nathan. And then she left. Nathan remained in the sunroom, staring out at the garden, brighter, fuller than he remembered. The road ahead would be long, but for the first time, he was ready to walk it, one step at a time. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of the Carter estate, casting soft golden patterns across the hardwood floor. Nathan sat in the breakfast room, his fingers drumming against the marble surface while the coffee machine gurgled quietly in the background. A week had passed since his return, but the emotional distance between him and Isabelle still stretched wide, like an invisible wall. She was kind, composed, but there was distance in her tone, precision in her politeness. She hadn't let him in. Every conversation felt like treading water, and Nathan was tired of drowning in it. Footsteps interrupted his thoughts. Maya appeared in the doorway with the morning mail. Here's today's post, she said gently, placing the stack on the table before disappearing down the hallway. He flipped through the envelopes without much thought, bills, catalogs, an invitation or two, until one caught his eye. It was addressed to Isabelle. The handwriting was elegant, formal. The return address was from Boston, a law firm he vaguely recognized. He stared at it for a moment, curiosity tugging at him. But he set it down. Seconds later, Isabelle entered the room. Her cream blouse was tucked neatly into navy trousers, hair pulled into a loose bun. Effortless. She moved to the counter, poured herself tea, and only then noticed the envelope. Her expression shifted, just for a moment. Something important? He asked casually. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she walked to the table, picked it up, and carefully opened it. Her eyes skimmed the letter. No reaction, but he saw her grip on the paper tighten ever so slightly. Everything okay? She folded it and set it down. Yes, just some legal paperwork. Inheritance matters. He raised an eyebrow. Inheritance? She nodded, taking a sip of her tea. My great-aunt Elizabeth passed away recently. I didn't expect to be included in the will, but apparently she left me a sizable portion of her estate. The phrase hung in the air. Sizable portion. He kept his face neutral. That's unexpected. She was private about her affairs. I had no idea, Isabelle replied, her tone even. Nathan leaned back slightly. How sizable are we talking? She hesitated, clearly debating how much to share. Enough to change things. That landed like a stone in his stomach, but he nodded anyway and returned to his coffee, doing his best to hide the knot forming in his chest. She stood shortly after, excusing herself, and left him alone with the silence and the unopened questions. Unreadable? Yes, I have. The silence that followed was dense, filled with everything they hadn't said and maybe still couldn't. Nathan wanted to tell her how proud he was, how blind he'd been not to see her strength sooner. But none of the words that formed in his head felt like enough. So he sat down on the edge of the couch, dragging a hand through his hair. I used to think success was about power, he admitted quietly, being the one in charge, the one calling the shots. But seeing you now, I realize how wrong I was. Success isn't about control. It's about building something that means something, something that lasts. She looked at him, her expression softening just slightly. It took me a long time to realize that too. I want to be a part of that, he said, holding her gaze, but only if you'll let me. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. And yet, he saw it. Hope. Faint, but there, like the first flicker of light on a stormy horizon. You hurt me, Nathan, she said, her voice gentle but sure. More than you know. I know, he whispered, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. She rose, hugging her arms tightly around herself as she turned to the window. Rain streaked the glass, softening the world outside. The sky was slowly beginning to clear. I don't know if we'll ever be what we once were. Maybe we're not meant to be, he said, rising too. Maybe we're meant to be something new, something better. She didn't respond, just closed her eyes, letting the weight of his words settle into the room. And when she finally turned to him, her expression was layered, uncertain, yes, but also open. I need time, she said again. But this time, there was something else behind it, something real. He nodded. I'll wait. As the rain slowed to a soft drizzle, they stood together in the quiet room, two people, no longer running from their past. The road ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time, they weren't afraid to walk it. The late afternoon light streamed into Nathan Carter's downtown office, casting elongated shadows across the polished wood conference table. The smell of leather and fresh espresso still lingered in the air, but the usual energy, that unmistakable hum of power, was gone. Nathan sat at the head of the table, shirt collar undone, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Financial reports were strewn in front of him, each more brutal than the last. The numbers didn't lie. His company was in serious trouble. He leaned back in his chair, exhaustion sinking deep into his bones. Just a few months ago he'd been soaring. New developments, endless press, nothing but green lights. Then it all started to crumble. A failed luxury condo project had drained millions. Investors grew skittish. Rumors of instability began circling like vultures. And now, the board wanted answers. Sir Margaret, his assistant, appeared in the doorway. The board's expecting you at 4. They'll want a detailed recovery plan. He nodded, though he didn't have one yet. Thanks, Margaret. Once she left, the room felt even heavier. It was supposed to be the guy who had it all figured out. The man who never cracked. But this time, the cracks were everywhere. His phone buzzed. A message lit up from Sienna Rhodes. Heard about the business. Want to talk? He stared at it, then deleted it without replying. She distanced herself the moment things got tough. And he was done with distractions, with ghosts. He didn't need sympathy or seduction. He needed clarity. And clarity felt miles away. Across town, Isabelle Carter sat in the bright, welcoming conference room of the nonprofit organization she'd partnered with. The space buzzed with purpose, charts on the wall, student photos pinned along one board, stacks of files documenting real change. The director smiled warmly. Thanks to your support, we've expanded to 2 more schools this year. The outreach has been incredible. Isabelle smiled, her heart swelling with quiet pride. That's great to hear. Let's keep pushing forward. As the meeting wrapped up, her phone buzzed. A message from Maya. Thought you should know, Nathan's company is all over the news. Isabelle frowned and tapped the link. A headline stared back at her. Carter Enterprises on the brink. Can the former powerhouse rebound? She read the article slowly. Every word hit a little harder than expected. She had once believed Nathan was invincible, unshakable. But that Nathan didn't exist anymore. And the man taking his place, she wasn't sure who he was yet. She closed the article, uncertain what to feel, pity, concern, indifference. She had spent so long building a life without him. She didn't want to lose herself by stepping back into his storm. And yet, a part of her couldn't shake the hollow feeling blooming in her chest. Was he truly beyond saving, or was this the moment that would finally change him? That evening, Nathan sat in his apartment, staring out at the city skyline, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. He had spent hours trying to form a strategy. He called contacts, dug through spreadsheets, ran numbers. None of it added up. For once, he felt small. His thoughts wandered. Back to Isabelle. They always did. Did she know what was happening? Did she care? His chest tightened with the memory of her voice, the way she looked at him the last time they spoke. The knock at the door startled him. He stood slowly and opened it, expecting Margaret, or maybe no one at all. Instead, there she was. Isabelle. Rain clung to the edges of her navy trench coat. Her hair was damp and her face was etched with quiet resolve. "Can I come in?" He stepped aside, unsure if this was real. She moved past him, shedding her coat and draping it over a chair. The apartment felt charged now, heavy with everything unsaid. "I heard about the business," she said, voice steady. He exhaled. "I figured you would." "I didn't know if I should come," she continued, turning to face him. "But I couldn't stop thinking about you." His heart stuttered. "I don't know what you expect to find here, Isabelle. I'm not in a good place." "I know," she said simply. "That's why I'm here." He dropped onto the couch, head in his hands. "I've screwed everything up. I don't even know where to begin." She hesitated, then sat beside him. "Start by being honest. With yourself." He looked at her, pain etched into every line of his face. "I've made a mess, in business, in life, in us." "I'm not here to rehash the past," she said, firm but gentle. "Gently? I'm here because I believe you can still fix this. But you need to stop trying to do it all alone." Nathan turned toward her, his eyes swimming with a mixture of fear and fragile hope. "I don't know if I can." "You can," she said firmly. "But you have to stop seeing asking for help as weakness. It's not. It's growth." Her words filled the room, and for the first time in a long while, the weight in Nathan's chest began to shift. He had spent so much of his life trying to be the man who never faltered, never needed anyone. But that path had left him hollow. "What do I do?" he asked, voice breaking. "You take it one step at a time," Isabelle said, placing her hand gently over his, "and you start by believing you're worth a second chance." He looked down at her hand, steady, grounding. It didn't fix anything, but it gave him something to hold on to. "Thank you," he whispered, voice heavy with sincerity. As they sat together, the city twinkling beyond the windows, Nathan understood. Redemption didn't come from undoing the past. It came from learning how to build something better. And with Isabelle's quiet belief in him, he finally believed in himself. The soft hum of early morning traffic drifted up from the street below as Isabelle Carter stood by the window of her home office. Sunlight spilled across the garden, her garden, glowing against the vibrant bursts of color she had cultivated months ago. Back when she needed something to grow, even if nothing else in her life made sense. Her phone buzzed behind her. She didn't need to look to know it was him. Nathan had been texting her all week, some updates, some just checking in. She hadn't ignored him out of spite, she just didn't know what to say. Every word between them felt delicate now, like any misstep could tip the balance too far. She turned and picked up her phone, scrolling through his messages. One stood out. "I'll be at the cafe on 5th at noon. No expectations. I'd just like to see you." Her heart hesitated. She thought about all the ways he had failed her. All the nights she waited, unsure if he'd call, if he'd come home. All the times she had felt small in his world. But then she remembered the man who had stood at her door. The man who was trying. He wasn't perfect, but maybe neither was she. Her fingers moved before her doubt could catch up. "I'll be there." The cafe on 5th was small, rustic, and filled with the scent of coffee and cinnamon. The kind of place where time seemed to slow. Isabelle stepped inside, nerves fluttering. She spotted Nathan immediately. He sat at a corner table, a half-finished coffee in front of him, a notebook open to a blank page. He looked up as she approached, a flicker of relief passing across his face. "You came," he said, rising. "I did," she said softly, sliding into the chair across from him. "How long have you been waiting?" "Not long." He closed the notebook and leaned back slightly. "Wasn't sure you'd come." "Neither was I." For a moment, they both looked at their drinks, not each other. Then she spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about us." His posture straightened slightly. And I don't know where I stand," she said honestly. "I've gotten used to protecting myself. I don't know how to stop." He nodded, his eyes steady. "You don't have to stop. Not for me. I just want you to know I'm here, and I'm not leaving. I need to know it'll be different this time." "It will be," he said quietly. "I can't erase what I've done. But I've changed, Isabelle. I know now that none of it matters, the deals, the status, not without someone to share it with. Her breath caught. She looked at him, saw the man she used to love, and someone new too. But what happens when things get hard again? She asked. When the next opportunity shows up. I won't run again, he said. I'll prove it, not with words, with time. She searched his face for doubt, but all she saw was honesty. Her walls trembled, not falling, but shifting. I'm scared, she whispered. He reached for her hand across the table. So am I. That's how I know it matters. Why? Because if we didn't care, it wouldn't scare us. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. You make it sound so simple. It's not, he said with a faint smile. But nothing worth keeping ever is. They sat in silence for a beat, his hand wrapped gently around hers. She didn't pull away. Then she did, slowly, to gather her thoughts. I need one more thing from you. Anything. You have to accept that I'm not the woman you left behind, she said, her voice unwavering. I've built something, I'm proud of it, and I won't give that up for anyone, not even you. He smiled, not out of pride, but reverence. I wouldn't want you to. That's strength. That's why I still love you. Her heart thudded, heavy with the weight of emotion. She looked away. When she turned back, he was still there, flawed, real, and finally, ready. Okay, she whispered. I'm willing to try. His smile was quiet and full of light. Thank you. But this doesn't mean everything's fixed, she added. I know, we've got a lot of work ahead. And I'm not promising anything. Neither am I, just effort, every day. They finished their drinks slowly, the conversation drifting into safer ground. By the time they walked out together, the tension between them had eased, replaced with something gentler. Not certainty, but possibility. As they walked side by side down the busy sidewalk, Isabelle glanced at him. This wasn't the end. It wasn't even the beginning of the end. It was the beginning of something new. It wouldn't be easy. But for the first time in years, she believed it could be real. The garden was painted in twilight, hues of gold and lavender washing over the flowers. Isabelle stood on the stone path, the scent of jasmine wrapping around her like a quiet memory. This garden had been her sanctuary, and now it felt like the starting point of something more. Something not just hers, but still wholly her own. Isabelle Carter rested her hands on the pergola railing, the same place where she had spent countless nights questioning everything about the life she once shared with Nathan. There was a time she came here to cry, to silently scream, to wonder why she wasn't enough. But tonight, there were no tears, only the hum of possibility. She heard the crunch of footsteps behind her and turned to see Nathan approaching. He had traded his tailored suits for something softer. Dark jeans, a gray sweater, a quiet shadow of stubble along his jaw. He looked different. And it wasn't just the clothes. There was something steadier about him, grounded, present. As he reached her, he offered a tentative smile, like he wasn't sure if he was welcome in this sacred space. You found me, she said softly, turning back to the garden. You weren't exactly hiding, he replied, leaning against the railing beside her. They stood in silence, the sounds of rustling leaves and chirping crickets filling the air between them. Nathan glanced at the garden, his brow creasing slightly. I remember when you first started this, he said. I didn't really get it back then, why you were so dedicated to it. Isabelle smiled faintly. That's because back then, you didn't know what it felt like to need something that was just yours. He nodded. No protest, no excuse. I do now. She looked at him, not expecting that answer, but she let the quiet linger. I know tonight matters, he said after a while. It feels like a turning point. She inhaled slowly, her fingers tightening on the railing. It could be, she said. Or it could be the end. The words landed heavy. Nathan shifted, turning to face her completely. I don't want it to be the end, Isabelle. I believe we can build something new, something better. She looked down at her hands, her thoughts churning like the soft autumn breeze around them. It's not that simple, she said. I've worked so hard to build a life of my own, to stand on my own. I don't want to take that from you, he said quickly. I want to be part of that life, not replace it. She finally met his gaze. That's what scares me. What if we fall back into old patterns? What if I lose myself again? You won't, he said, steady, because I won't let you. And more importantly, you won't let yourself. His certainty caught her off guard. For a moment, she let herself imagine that maybe he was right. That maybe the woman she had become, confident, independent, strong, would never disappear again. She had learned to choose herself. "What if it's not enough?" she whispered. He stepped closer. "It's enough," he said gently. "Because we're both different now. We've both fought to become who we are." She searched his eyes for doubt, but found none. And beneath her fear, something stirred. Hope. "Do you remember the last time we stood out here together?" she asked, her voice catching. He nodded. "You were planting the lavender. I left before you finished." "No, you didn't just leave," she said, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "You left me standing here, wondering if you'd ever come back." "I wish I had come back sooner," he said, voice thick. "But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving." Tears welled in her eyes. She laughed softly, brushing them away. "I hate that you still make me cry." He smiled gently. "It's not what I'm trying to do." She took a deep breath, steadying herself in the stillness. The past would always be part of their story. But it didn't have to be the whole story. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know," he said, reaching for her hand. "We can be scared together." For the first time that night, she let herself believe. Maybe their love hadn't disappeared. Maybe it had just been buried, waiting to be rediscovered. "What if this doesn't work?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "Then we try again," he said, "and if we fall, we get back up, together." Her heart swelled. She had been so afraid of letting herself feel, but Nathan's vulnerability, his quiet strength, chipped away at her walls. "I want this," she said, voice clear now. "I really do." "Then let's make it work," he said, squeezing her hand. "One step at a time." She nodded, and a single tear slipped down her cheek. But this time she didn't wipe it away. It wasn't sadness, it was release. As the sun slipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the garden, Isabelle leaned into Nathan's arms. His embrace wasn't a rescue, it was a partnership. And for the first time in years, she felt safe. Not because she needed him to shield her, but because she knew she could stand on her own, and he would never try to stand in front of her again. "We have a lot of work ahead," she murmured. "I know," he said, kissing her forehead gently, "but we'll get there." Around them, the garden swayed in the evening breeze, a soft rhythm like the earth itself was exhaling. This wasn't the end. It wasn't even a return to what they were. It was a beginning, rooted in honesty, respect, and the belief that love, when nurtured right, could bloom again. And as they stood beneath the darkening sky, Isabelle knew. The future didn't feel so uncertain anymore.